What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, it's been a while. It's good to be back here recording another episode of Guarani Vision. Obviously, here we are right now in the midst of June. Certainly we see Fede just completely bundled up. No, it's not what you think it is. It's very much they do have cold weather in Paraguay, as people maybe are hard to not believe, but here we are as we get started into another month. Obviously, the European season is over with Manchester City winning the Champions League. Obviously, the NBA. Sorry to you boys, as Miami Heat fan, or maybe our new resident Guarani Vision podcast host is probably going to get a new team because of where he's moved on. We'll talk about where in just a second. But obviously, in terms of the football in terms of football, here we are. Obviously, with the end of the Apertura, putting a bow tie on that. Obviously, the Libertadores and the Sudamericana, their group stages are coming to a close. We'll talk about which Paraguayan teams are still in the position to qualify, to possibly go into another tournament, or just to be out completely 100%. And of course, the national team is back. The national team will be playing their first game of 2023. Their second game of 2023, they already played in March. Their second game of 2020, but their first game at home in quite some time as they take on Nicaragua on Father's Day. We'll talk about the team, what to expect, and really just the overall vibe. So let me go into someone that I can feel that is very cold, but I don't know how it is over there in Paraguay, Fede. But how are you, man? It's good to speak after quite some time.
Yeah, it's good to be back after a couple of weeks. Roberto, hi to you. Hi to Ralph. We'll send our greets also to Maria, who can't join us today, but we'll probably be back for the next episode. Obviously, say hi to everybody that's always with us in Guarani Vision, this podcast where we put up to date with the Paraguayan League, talk about Libertadores, talk about our Paraguayans abroad also pretty much every week. And the opportunity to wrap up this Apertura, look back at the best highlights, the best things that happened in this Apertura, obviously, and look up ahead because the Clausura is going to start in just 2-3 weeks away. Players are not going to have that much vacations that the guys from the national team are not having either, because most of them came to Paraguay, the ones that were called up, obviously, to the national team. They've been training these last couple of days. They're getting ready for a special game at home in front of their home crowd. They need to win. They need to do it in fashion also, just to try to get the fans by their side, because in September the real thing starts. And obviously, I'm looking forward to everything that's going to happen these next couple of days, because besides the Apertura happening, we also have the women's Apertura coming to an end. Olimpia looks like they're going to have another championship under their shoulders. They won the first game against Libertad Limpeño by 3-1 in Libertad's ground. So they got to play now the second game at Olympia Stadium, and they could pick up another trophy and be also in Libertadores for the women's that's going to be played in just a couple of months. Obviously, talk about all these things here in Guarani Vision. Great to be back. And you suck for mentioning Miami Heat, man. I'm just getting over that situation.
I think, let's see if one guy who has been a Miami Heat fan for quite some time, depending on his new location, might switch off to another side. Ralph, how are you? Give a little bit of an update of what's been going on with you as well, considering that you now have to wake up a bit more earlier than both of us right now.
Yeah, it's a bit earlier in here. I'm down in Texas now, where I've moved recently, but still a Heat fan, of course. You can't switch your teams like that. But it is a lot of baseball down here. I think maybe I'm gonna have to switch to Astros to join in with that, because they're a bit better than the Miami Marlins. So I might be going for that. And of course, we got Paraguayan players here. We got Ivan Franco, Sebastian Ferreira playing in Houston Dynamo. We got just up the road Rodney Redes as well in Austin. So we've got plenty of Paraguayans down in Texas, so I'm just joining the crowd.
It's obviously good to see you in, of course, Texas. Here we are, just spreading ourselves up a bit more, be it Paraguay, Connecticut, Florida, and now in Texas as well. But no, we're not talking about geography or anything like that. That's not what the show is about. Let's go straight into what we saw, because the Apertura did end this weekend. Obviously, they were winning another championship again after their third straight Apertura title, guys. Can you believe it? So obviously, looking into the table real quick, we look at Libertad, who finished first with 51 points. Cerro Porteño, the side that was really the only team that kind of challenged Libertad all the way, they finish it off. And it's crazy to believe that they have the same amount of losses than Libertad, but because of the amount of draws that separated the gap from 10 points. So Cerro Porteño finished second with 41 points. In third place, the surprise team, I would say, of this Apertura, the recently promoted side, obviously, is Sportivo Trinidense with Jose Aruja. I think this was a side that I think a couple of us thought would be in there, kind of being maybe not as a team that would be challenging for the title or anything like that, but finishing in third is big because now that kind of boosts their chances of possibly qualifying to an international competition if they do well in the Clausura. Looking at the rest of the table, we got Guarani in fourth, Nacional in fifth, Olimpia, at the time, defending champions of the Clausura, finished in sixth with 31 points. Looking at the rest of the table, Sportivo Ameliano with 30 in eighth, Luqueño, General Caballero with Juan León Mallorquín in ninth, Guareña in 10th, Resistencia in 11th, and in last place with 15 points, Tacuarembó. So looking at top goal scorers as well, obviously, Oscar Cardoso at his age of just 40 years old. It's hard to believe that someone of that age, but we talked about players like Roque Santa Cruz also leading the goal scoring over there in Paraguay. He led the way with 10 goals. Marcelo Perez of Sportivo Luqueño with 8. Pedro de Valde of Sportivo Trinidense with 7. Rounding off the top 5, Alicia Sarkis of Sportivo Almeliano with 6. And Lorenzo Melgarejo of Libertad with 6 as well. I mean, I want to just get a few impressions from this, Fede. I'll go to you because certainly as someone who has covered the Apertura and, all of us have seen what the season has been. I mean, I guess some of your impressions really, what kind of surprised you? What shocked you? What were you really expected of, I guess? Because certainly I think for us, I think Libertad were the deserved champions at the end of the day. They were one of the favorites, and if it was not going to be them, it was probably going to be Cerro or Olimpia or something like that. But I mean, what are your kind of final thoughts on this Apertura season and really what to expect now heading into the Clausura, which hard to believe, man, it's going to start very, very soon in about, I would say, 25 days or something on July 7th.
Yeah, to start right after, right as soon as July also starts the Clausura. And yeah, we're looking back at this Apertura, just the way that Libertad took it away, I would say the key factor was probably the injuries on the rest of the teams. I mean, we talked about this several times. What happened with Olimpia ever since they lost Erlis Gonzalez, they lost several players after him. They were never together. You were expecting for them to give Libertad a run. Also, Cerro Porteño had problems staying healthy, but especially keeping up the rhythm. That's something that everybody in Cerro is talking about. What happened with this team that couldn't run as fast as they were running just a couple of games ago? Why they didn't have enough for these last couple of games? That was something that really caught everybody's attention. Cerro just didn't have enough. And then, yeah, obviously the surprises. I think it was a good tournament for Guarani, even though they're changing their manager after this good season. They didn't have a good second half, maybe with the wins, but they put their heads into the Sudamericana, and they're pretty much going forward. They still got a game. They still got a game to be there. But Trinidense, I mean, this is the team that we should probably focus on more, because I've never seen a team being promoted and having a season like this. I mean, being up there and giving the big teams a run for their money. This is something that we've seen probably from Guaidenia, from other teams these last couple of seasons, but it's good. I think the competition is very good. A team with maybe not such a huge budget like Olimpia, like Cerro, like Libertad, even Guarani, but they still managed to do it with players with a lot of experience also. I think that was very important for Trinidense, just the way they managed to gather their squad for this season. The players that they had already intermediate, most of them are playing now in first division. And look out for this team, because if they have a good run in the Clausura, we might see them in Libertadores. We might see him have a good spot in the Sudamericana even. So I think that this is a team to look out for in the future, just the way they've done this Apertura. That was probably the big shocker to me. And then you have all the teams that just weren't up to the challenge, right? And those are a whole bunch of teams from the half of the table down. I think all those teams should be disappointed on the kind of tournament they had. A lot of changes on the managers that obviously affected the situation. A calendar that was very tight. So the injuries, to the way I saw it, were key, Ralph. I mean, that's something that we mentioned several times. Libertad had so many players. Anybody got injured because they had their problems with injuries also. Lorenzo Melgarejo was out. They had a couple of players that were out early in the season, but they managed to handle it every game. And Oscar Tacuara Cardoso, I mean, if I have to pick one player from the Apertura, I think the MVP goes to Oscar Tacuara Cardoso. Just the amount of goals that he made, that those, what was it, 4 goals against Cerro Porteño, 3 goals against Cerro Porteño that he scored playing at home, and that was a key match also, him showing up that way. I mean, I got to give it to him. If I'm picking an MVP just because I wanted to do it, I'll give it to him.
Yeah, hard to argue with Tacuara. Had a great season, but I wanted to pick up on what you said about Trinidad. You said you've never seen anything like it before. It's because it's never happened. So a newly promoted team had never got more than 30 points. Trinidad got 38 points, which is why they finished third. So it's an incredible achievement. I think it's very exciting because it's an experienced team, but the manager is very young. Jose Arrua, who's the son of Saturnino Arrua, the famous Cerro Porteño player. He's only about, I think, 35, 36. He's very young. He's in his 30s. So that's quite exciting that he's come in. They play very interesting football. Look at the top scorer, Pedro del Valle. He's actually playing in midfield. So your top scorer is coming from midfield because he does play a very exciting kind of brand of football. And so that was really interesting to see. And I think kind of a nice breath of fresh air against some of what we saw, which was more typical, which was Libertad running away with the title. The difficulty for Trinidad, because Roberto mentioned the Clausura is coming up, is now the transfer window is open. And so suddenly, if you're a small team that has a good season, people are going to leave. Interestingly, Lucas Barrios has already left. He's gone to Luqueño, which is a really big signing for Luqueño and very important. But I noticed like someone like Paul Riveros, who was a defender doing very well. I think a lot of teams will be looking at him, especially maybe Cerro Porteño, because they needed a defender because they got Eduardo Brock from Brazil and he just hasn't been up to standard. They really haven't filled that gap from Alexis Duarte. And I think that was Cerro's, maybe their big problem this season. So they might be looking at him. And so you'll start to see maybe some of that team being moved around, sort of a victim of their success, I guess. Another side that I thought started to do well towards the end of the season was Nacional. Nacional have a very good manager in Saravia, and they were a bit slow to start, but they started to churn away and get those results. And so I'd watch out for them in the Clausura, because that's a team that will probably stick together. What they really struggled with, similar Cerro, missed Duarte, right, in defense. Nacional missed Gruera, their striker, who had gone to Olympia, and it took them a while maybe to try and fill that gap and find those goals. But those Trinidad and Nacional, will keep an eye on them. And then in terms of, good players, you already mentioned Oscar Cardoso. I also thought Diego Gomez in Libertad is looking really good now. He's already played for the senior national team. We'll talk about it later, but he's in the squad to play against Nicaragua. He's a very exciting young player, and he plays in that kind of role of an attacking, thinking midfielder, but with a really good passing range. So he's a very exciting player to watch. So yeah, there was great things to pick up on. And I think what we always see as well, just one last point, is the Clausura can often be a better competition than the Apertura. Why? Because now the knockout stages happen for Copa Libertadores, Copa Sudamericana, and these big teams, especially Libertad, they have to start concentrating a bit more on that, focusing on that. And that can often open up the field a bit in the Clausura. So definitely, just because Libertad ran away with the league this time doesn't mean they will in the second half of the year.
It's certainly been quite a surprising season, I guess, for a lot of these teams, and also, be it good or could it be it bad. But it certainly will be very interesting what happens in the Clausura if we see some sort of competitiveness from other teams, not just Libertad, but also, like you said, Trinidad, if they can build from that and see if they can, maybe surprise a few other teams and see what they can do. But yeah, like you said, with a lot of these competitions, like the Libertadores and the Sudamericana happening, and some teams already in latter stages, I think that might cause a bit of the balance to kind of change to another way. So we'll definitely have to wait and see as we switch gears now to obviously the Copa Libertadores. And one team that we do have to mention, obviously, the side that kind of has impressed all of us, really. And I have to admit, I thought it was going to be a very hard group to begin with, but certainly it surprised me, and I'm sure for you guys as well, is Olimpia, currently top of the group with Atlético Nacional, Melgar, and Patronato with 11 points, 3 wins, 2 draws, and no losses. We're coming off, obviously, their 3-0 win against Atlético Nacional in the Defensores, goals from Mateo Gamarra, Guillermo Paiva, and Diego Torres. So, I mean, Ralph, I'll go to you on this one. I think certainly for Olympia's case, even after everything that they've kind of dealt with all season, switching to different managers, and here they are now with Diego Aguirre, a manager that I think still divides opinion for a lot of Olimpia fans, and certainly those that watch Paraguayan football. I think with this kind of qualification to the round of 16, it kind of gives them a bit more to believe now. Now, obviously, it's still a long way to go, and certainly because of the way that Olimpia is in comparison to other teams around the continent, I think you could say that they could feel a bit cautious. But I think some people are already starting to fill out kind of their prophecies and saying, oh, this happened in 2002 and 1990 and same thing happened in 2023 or something like that. I don't think it's that serious in comparison to like the real general fans, but I think for Olimpia, they kind of have to feel very satisfied in the position that they're at right now. And I think, finishing in as a top seed, I think could indeed help them very, very much, depending on who they might face, because they could face some big heavy hitters in the round of 16.
Yeah, go with me first. Rough left a second, but this Olimpia team, I mean, they look like they've gotten together now, Roberto. I mean, this was something that a lot of people, I think, were not expecting after Diego Aguirre's first games, where he looked kind of lost, where he looked like he didn't know what he was doing, especially on the Paraguayan league. But this is what they brought him for, right? I mean, he has the experience in Libertadores. He won it as a player, and he looks like a good manager in these kind of situations. Olimpia, yeah, we said it before, probably had an easy group. They were pretty much obligated to get out of this group, and I don't know if they have enough to win the championship, but look how they did it in 2013. Nobody was giving them any credit at all, and they managed to get to that final. So people are looking back to that situation, and the fans pushed this team, and that was something special also in the Defensores de Chaco the other day. The amount of people that were in the stands, pushing this team, supporting the players, even though in the Apertura they did a really bad job. They weren't up to the task, but this team looked together, they looked focused, and they looked totally different in Libertadores, which is something that the Olimpia fans are actually accustomed to seeing. You could be doing very bad in the local league, but suddenly in Libertadores, this team looks like a giant, and other teams respect them also. I mean, Atlético Nacional did not come to attack Olimpia, and this was the game for that first spot in their group. So I was actually hoping a lot to see a lot more from the Colombian side, and all I saw was Olimpia on that pitch. To be honest, from the start of the game, even with Mateo Gamarra scoring that first goal, then I think it was Paiva. The second goal, Paiva, who hadn't scored that much this season. I think it's very important for him also to get that score, to start scoring on Libertadores. That they need a striker like him to get hot. Stanley Gonzalez should be back for the second half of the year. They'll eventually get their star back, but apparently it is going to be a problem for this manager who can't sign anybody for the clausura or for what's coming up. But I do think there's a lot of positive stuff right now happening in Olimpia, and even players coming back. I mean, Diego Torres, who scored that third goal, which is a beautiful goal by the way that he controlled it and just the way that he ended the play. He's only 20 years old, so he's got so much ahead of him. And this is a player that went through a couple of injuries, but we'll see if he can keep up this rhythm, because he's probably one of those players that Olimpia can look into selling, because Olimpia can't sign right now. They still have that situation with the money, with all the depth that they have, and they need that money. They need to sell right now. I don't know if they're going to sell that many players. I think it's not going to be good for them, just because now they're on a run in Libertadores. And when you have the fans by your side, when you have that expectation, I think you need to keep the roster together as much as you can and try to compete. And Olimpia has done that before with this president, Cardona. When he had the opportunity to sell players, and he said, no, we're going to keep them together. We're going to keep this squad, and we're going to try to fight for something. And they did it last year. They ended up winning the clausura, and now they look like they can do something in this Libertadores, where I thought that the best situation for them was probably to go to Sudamericana. But right now they look like such a strong team, especially playing at home. They beat Patronato. They beat Atlético Nacional now. So look out for Olimpia. Olimpia is a special team in Libertadores. And it's one of those teams that a lot of giants in South America don't want to go up against. Not looking at the roster, but a lot of people are not going to want for Olimpia to come out there in their next draw for the round of 16. Olimpia's already there, and I think they have a very good chance of being in that first spot in their group, Roberto.
Yeah, definitely. As we wait for Ralph here, obviously he just had to do something real quick, so he'll be back. But yeah, I think isn't that part of that mystique? I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people want to believe that but then at the same time, you think to yourself, wait, there's been teams like Argentina, from Brazil that kind of dominated. So you think, does that mystique still exist? And I would say, even seeing the way that they've been playing, even let's be real, Fede, it's not the strongest Olympia side in years, but yet they can get good performances like that. I mean, it's starting to add up just a bit. Well, obviously, it's still very early to see if they can indeed count on that, because obviously, I think mystique is one thing, but the talent on what you see on the pitch is another. But is it there that people can start to believe right now that they can go far in the Libertadores, or is it like we just have to pump the brakes a bit and be like, no, hang on, let's go game by game, leg by leg, and all that kind of stuff?
Faith is a weird thing, Roberto, and it can push things also, it can move a couple of mountains. And Olimpia kind of needs that right now. They need that positive vibe behind the squad right now, because they can't sign anybody. They can't sign big players. They don't have their star available. And I think that was a big issue on this first half of the season, this first half of the year, not having Derlis Gonzalez, their top scorer, somebody that was showing up in pretty much every game. The player that takes the most money out of the squad also, he knows he is the star, and the team was playing around him lately. So there was a lot of adjustments that Diego Aguirre had to do. He had to promote a couple of players. He had to bring back players that were also injured. I mean, Tito Torres been playing in the midfield. I think that's been a key also. I mean, mixing players around in different positions when you don't have Richard Ortiz, which is another star player in this team that was already in that squad in 2013 when they made it to the final. These are players that have the experience. These are players that are going to help you out in this moment. Alex Silva also coming to his best shape at the end of the season. He was scoring at this last game for the Apertura after playing 300 games with Olimpia. He was also on that squad in 2013. So these are the guys that are going to show the way, I believe, for the rest of the team. And these are the guys that know how to play Libertadores. I think Olimpia has a lot of those players, and it's just great that they have that challenge ahead of them, Roberto. Just to see that now they got something to get ready for the second half of the year. And it's not just the Clausura, it's also the Libertadores, the biggest stage for Olimpia, where they always feel responsible that they need to do big things. You got Cerro Porteño out of the Libertadores. Libertad, it has it really hard. So the team that had the best week and just one game away from being over in the group stage was clearly Olimpia with this 3-0. I mean, this was something that a lot of people weren't expecting. I wasn't expecting 3 goals of the difference, especially after what we saw in that first game against Atlético Nacional. Atlético Nacional looked much better. Yeah, there were a couple of players missing, but Olimpia just blew them away, and they had a great game from start to finish. That 3-0 was just clearly the best result for this game that I saw in Defensores del Chaco.
It certainly has been quite an interesting ride for Olimpia and the Libertadores. Not the same can't be said for the other Paraguayan teams right now. Obviously, looking at the other two playing in the Libertadores, we have Libertad, who are coming off a 1-0 loss to Paranaense. Ironically enough, they're still in a position to qualify to the next round, to the round of 16. As crazy as that might seem, because they do play against the side at home that they are up against, that they will have to try and beat, and that's Atlético Mineiro. Obviously, Libertad playing Atlético Mineiro by then on the 27th. Looking at the other side, the one that's kind of done worse and kind of surprised a lot of us because of how well they kind of started, and then they just fallen flat on their face, really is Cerro Porteño. And ironically enough, they're still in a position to go to the Sudamericana, but again, they take on a side that they have to face. Basically, the winner of that will go into the Sudamericana, and that's Barcelona Guayaquil. Now, obviously, the disadvantage that Cerro have that Libertad don't have is that they have to go all the way to Guayaquil for this. So they have to go to Ecuador and try to get some sort of result. I mean, obviously, we still got a couple more days until the game actually happens, but do you feel any confidence for either of these sides, be it Cerro, because I know they kind of fell flat on their face in the Apertura race, and that's kind of really coincided with what they've been doing in the Libertadores. But for Libertad's case, it's crazy to believe because they're such a weird team, and yeah, they were able to wrap up the Apertura, but in the league, it feels so weird because they can get results as they need away from home, but they can't seem to win at home, which is the crazy part. So, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm not really feeling confident for either of these two sides getting the results that they need to qualify to the to any competition, let alone one or like the Sudamericana or even just the Libertadores.
No, I'm keeping my faith up. I'm keeping my hopes up for Libertad. I think they can do it. Yeah, obviously they had a very hard group with two Brazilians, and they were almost getting a tie in this last game against Paranaense. You know, that 0-0 draw was going to be a very important point for this situation now against Atlético Mineiro. The good thing is they're going to play at home. They're going to have their home crowd, and this is a team that, yeah, maybe they were in that situation of getting the Apertura trophy and kind of distracted, a lot of partying going around. But especially, I think, you know, against Paranaense, I think they were actually thinking of getting a tie. I don't think Libertad went all out in that game. I think they went to play that game thinking that a tie was a really good result. Unfortunately, Paranaense scored, and unfortunately, the refs did not go Libertad's way after checking the biggest situation that Libertad had in that second half. They took out of the result the goal that Héctor Tito Villalba scored. So it ended up being a win for Paranaense, who took a step forward in the Libertadores. It could have been that big game for Libertad, but they lost a very important game against Alianza Lima. And that was very weird. You know, that was something that Libertad fans still can't get their heads around. It's been something that Ralph has said many times. How does Garnero handle the situations in Libertadores? And I'm keeping my face up just because of all the power and attack this team has. I think they can win. I think they can beat Atlético Mineiro by 2 goals. Is it going to be easy? Hell no. Atlético Mineiro has a whole bunch of good players. They know what they're doing. They've had this squad for a couple of years now. It's not going to be an easy task for Libertad, but I think it's just great for Libertad and for Cerro Porteño to have a couple of weeks off to try to give the players a mental break and especially a physical break, because I think that Cerro Porteño especially looked very tired at the end of the season. Is it because of the way the coach handled, the calendar? Maybe he should have rested the players a bit more. Is it because he didn't have enough players on the squad because he didn't believe it? Is it because of his style? I think it was a little bit of everything in Cerro Porteño's situation. Maybe with a couple of weeks off, maybe getting a couple of players back. I mean, if they can get Patiño for this game, it would be awesome if they can get another center back for this very important game against Barcelona in Guayaquil. I hope they can turn around, but it has not looked good in finals for Cerro Porteño. I remember that game against Libertad in the local league. I'm remembering this game against Palmeiras where they could get something at home and extend the situation in the group. They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it against Bolívar. They tried to play in high pressure. I did not understand the way that the coach, what the Facundo Saba's strategy really was to play in La Paz. I did not like the way they handled that game. So I'm thinking that Facundo Saba right now, he's just gaining experience in Libertadores. He doesn't know how to handle these kind of games. He doesn't have that balance in his team. And the best we've seen out of this team is when this team was rested, Ralph. And I'm looking forward to that, for Cerro Porteño to come down, forget about the Apertura, and put their heads only on this game and try to make it to Sudamericana. This is the only way they're going to be able to save themselves from these first bad 6 months.
I just wanted to jump in, obviously, before we get into that, because obviously we didn't get Ralph's opinion about Olimpia, but just kind of your thoughts on their kind of just their campaign so far, if fans can really start to believe. And yeah, just following up on Fede's point, just, you know, how you see both both Libertad and Cerro Porteño really gearing up to their last match, group stage match, which could indeed decide their international competition future.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, with Olympia, we did talk before about it being an easier group, and I think that's kind of proved itself in that maybe at times they haven't played very well, and they're the weakest of the three teams, the Paraguayan teams, in terms of league standing, but they're the ones that have managed to find their way and qualify. And of course, a lot of people are getting very excited because with Olympia, there's always been this kind of feeling that when they don't play well, that's when they can go far in competition. The last time they went to the final, 2013, they didn't have a particularly strong team and they still managed to get there. So I think people are starting to get excited about this possibility. And then talking about Libertad and Cerro, who have these huge games coming up with everything kind of on the line. Yeah, for Libertad, I think Fede was mentioning in it that the losing to Alianza Lima, we talked about it at the time, this is going to come back to haunt you. And you know, if they just picked up 3 points there, this would be a totally different proposition. They have beaten Mineiro recently. I think also, I don't know why, but the styles of the two Brazilian teams, Paranaense and Mineiro, we've always seen that Paranaense caused more problems for Libertad, because we also saw this last year when they played each other. And so I think maybe there's something about the Mineiro style that could suit Libertad a bit more. And they really did need that rest, because since they won the league, they kind of dropped off in everything, right? They lost to Cerro, then they lost the Libertadores game, then they drew with Tacuary in their final game. They're just not really in that winning momentum. So I think this kind of rest time, this kind of refocus, not a lot of players have gone to the national team. I think Diego Gomez and Campuzano, yeah, just two. So they keep most of the team together now to gear up for this match. Can they do it? Big question. It's very hard against the Brazilian teams, but what we're seeing this year, actually, in a general theme across the competition, not just in the groups of the Paraguayan sides, are maybe the Brazilian sides aren't looking as all kind of conquering as they have in previous years. We've seen lots of teams start to push them and get results that maybe we didn't see last year, away from, of course, I guess, your Flamengo and your Palmeiras, who really are like a step above. But I feel there's definitely the quality in there from Libertad. We talked about the standard of their team, of their squad. So if they can just get those tactics and that plan right on the night, then I think there's a possibility of them pulling something off and staying in the Libertadores, which of course is the key. That's the key goal for them. And then for Cerro, I mean, Barcelona's been a team that caused some problems recently. Remember, famously, they lost 4-0 to Barcelona when Chiqui Arce was still coach. And so it's been a team that can cause problems for them. In a way, there's similar styles. I think both of the sides prefer to have the ball and prefer to kind of be the ones on the front foot. But in this case, it really is Cerro. They're going to have to take the game to Barcelona, because they need the points, right? They need to really get this game and win this game. Again, is a similar theme we've been talking about throughout the year, right? They're really struggling defensively. They're really not finding the right kind of combination with the central defensive pairing. He's played Pires de Mota there a lot, and at times Pires de Mota does things very good. Of course, he's great in the build-up because he's a midfielder, but anytime the ball's into the box or an aerial kind of threat, then he's not very good at dealing with that, because he's just not that kind of player. So they've got some question marks there. And then going forward, I think there's always been this issue of, well, Morales is scoring penalties, but is Morales really playing at the same kind of level he was last year? There's a lot of focus has been on Turin, and really it's like, if Turin does well, then maybe Cerro do well. Turin traditionally has been really good at home for Cerro. He's the all-time top scorer in La Nueva Olla, but has he been able to produce these kind of big performances away from him? So there's a lot of pressure, I think, on maybe just a couple of key players to perform for Cerro, to see if they can get that result. Again, I think on paper, they have the strength, they have the squad strength to be able to win this game. It's just really on the night with that pressure, are they able to do it? And what we've seen, unfortunately, recently from Cerro, I think in the big games, they haven't been able to do it. So they weren't, the Libertad match where they lost 5-0, was it 5-0, 5-1? I forgot now. But when they lose that game, basically in the first 20 minutes, that was one example. I think we saw even in the Bolivar game at home, again, it was a big match and they didn't get up for it. So the Clásicos, they haven't been winning recently. So it's hard to see from recent evidence that Cerro can go and do this because they haven't been able to do it recently. That's not to say that they don't have the team strength to do it. I think they do. I think they're good enough to do it, but can they get it right mentally on the night?
Yeah, we definitely have to wait and see what happens to all those sides as we gear up, obviously, as well for the Sudamericana, because obviously we have to mention that Guarani are still top of their top of their group with 8 points. They are in a good position to qualify to the round of 16, or at worst, the knockout playoffs. They'll be taking on Huracan, the last place side. So we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens there. As for Tacuaru, their dream has been over. Their Sudamericana dream has been over with. They had just been eliminated, obviously, despite beating Oriente Petrolero on the day. A couple days ago, they are eliminated at the moment, so they will not be qualifying to any latter stages of the competition. So we'll definitely give you a full preview of what's left in the Libertadores and the Sudamericana in the next few days as we gear up now to switch gears really to the national team, because obviously Paraguay will be taking on Nicaragua in the Defensores del Chaco on June 18th, Father's Day. Over there in Paraguay, the 140th ranked team in the world at the moment, guys. And, you know, looking at some of the players, I mean, obviously you have your big names. You have the likes of Miguel Mirón, Julio Enciso, Gustavo Gomez, some of the same names that we've been used to seeing for quite some time. But before we get to the game itself, I think I want to go to Fede on this one. The one name that we didn't see on this list, and kind of a surprise that kind of had started to build up over the last few days before the call-ups were announced, was the exclusion of Antonio Sanabria. Now, obviously, Antonio Sanabria is a player that has been playing on the national team for quite some time, but he's coming off a really good season at Torino, the highest goal scorer of a Paraguayan in a top 5 league, 12 goals in the Serie A this season. So it's very interesting to say. And, you know, I was hearing Barros Schelotto in his press conference of the day when he was asked about it. He was saying that, you know, this is just, it's not the game for him. It's not the perfect option to have him there. I mean, you know, it's a weird situation to think about, really. But, you know, on the flip side, you look at Sanabria, you know, he's played so many games for the national team. He's played like over 30 games or something like that, only 2 goals. So clearly he, as much as he's been kind of effective in Spain and in Italy and all that kind of stuff, he just hasn't been able to repeat the marks for his national team. You know, 2 goals in 28 games is abysmal. And it's really sad to see. So, I mean, Fede, I want to go to you on this one because, yeah, obviously you still want to put him on the side because I think you still want their best players. And yes, obviously it is Nicaragua. It's certainly a side that Paraguay shouldn't lose to, especially at home, especially in a weird circumstances where the game is actually free. It's going to be an early game for Father's Day at 10:30 a.m. with the entrances being very there's free entrance in that, and maybe that's a good thing to get more fans in, or maybe it's just the lack of interest on the national team at the moment. But I do want to focus on the Sanabria situation because it's weird. It really is weird, especially when we've had kind of a goal scorer we haven't had in quite some time in a top 5 league. For him to not be on the list is a very weird situation to be in.
Yeah, just to not have everybody on the same page, right? I mean, Tony should have probably been here, even though if he wasn't going to play, he should have probably been here with the squad because we heard Schelotto also on his press conference saying there's no issue with the player. He's just not going to be with us for these couple of games. He thinks that he needs other kind of strikers, players that are even playing in Central America, like Carlos Gonzalez, who's been playing in Mexico all his life, pretty much all his career, and Gabriel Avalos, who's been pretty much our best forward in these last couple of games, especially against Chile, which was the opportunity we got to see him, where he had a great connection with Matias Rojas and he even scored a goal. So and he kept his rhythm also in his club in Argentinos Juniors, where he's doing a really good Libertadores, and you know his team is doing really well, and he's always playing. He's a starter. He's a star there. So I'm happy with the forwards that were called up, but this is something that I didn't want to see again. I mean, we saw it in the last process with Lorenzo Melgarejo, I think it was, that he didn't want to come to the national team because he wasn't getting game time. I think Berizzo also had issues with Derlis Gonzalez at a certain point. We still don't know the real situation that happened there. And I have the sense, I have the feeling that something like that is happening with Tony Sanabria, guys, that he's not on the same pitch with the coach, or he's not on the same page with the APF, with the FA, or he's not liking something in the group. Maybe he's not getting along with the players. He's not part of that group of players that were promoted pretty much to the national team. I'm talking about Gustavo Gomez. I'm talking about Almiron. We can Junior Alonso. There's a whole bunch of players that have been pushing the train, that have been pushing the car, trying to get us to the World Cup these last couple of times. And they're the heads in that locker room, and it's not easy probably to get in that locker room, win their respect, and I don't know if there's a good chemistry there with Tony and the rest of the squad. I'm just throwing things out there. I'm just throwing reasons that could be what's going on, because we don't really know. We haven't heard, especially the version from the player. I think that's what's missing right here. I mean, hopefully Tony Sanabria can put some light into this. Last time he was called up, he didn't come either. And I don't know if maybe the head coach didn't like this. And, Schelotto needs players that are really committed to the national team right now. They need to be on top of this. And we have a lot of players right now. We have Mati Rojas playing a sensational level. He's going to take his football now from Argentina, from Racing to Brazil. I think that's just a step forward in his career. Miguel Almiron and Enciso's season has been just phenomenal. So everybody's looking forward to seeing them in the Defensores del Chaco. I think a lot of people are going to the stadium just because they want to see these Premier League players in their top shape after the season they had. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of midfield he puts up there, and just to see if we can be strong in Defensores del Chaco. They haven't played there in a while, and it's going to be really good to have the fans by their side. I'm just hoping we win, and by many, many goals. I'm not going to be satisfied with a 1-0, with a 2-1. No. We picked Nicaragua, I believe, as our opponent, because we need to have a big game, a big impact on the fans, because this is the last game. After this one, we're going to have to wait until September to see the final list of who starts the qualifiers. But I'm not liking the Tony Sanabria situation, Roberto. We should have had him with us. He should be by our side. We don't have another player like him in Europe scoring the way he did this past season. He should be with the guys.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation, because like you said, we don't know from the player himself why he's not there. It's his best, I think it was his best ever season in Europe, or at least equaling what he did when he was on loan at Ijon. The situation with Sanabria, so people understand, he was born in Paraguay. He left very young to go to Spain. His family moved to Spain. That's where he gets picked up by Barcelona, and that's why he's in the Barcelona Academy. And so most of his life he's lived in Europe and outside of Paraguay. I don't know if that maybe affects things when it comes to, does he really want to play for the national team? Where does he feel kind of his allegiances are? Because remember, it's a country where he didn't grow up. Is not the same as Enciso Almiron. He didn't even do really they did bring him in, I think, for the under 17s or under 20s, but he doesn't come the whole way through with all those guys. Like the thing you have with Gustavo Gomez, Almiron, Derlis Gonzalez, they all came together and they've come through a long process. So they're very kind of joined together. But I agree. I mean, it would be good to have him there, because he's the best Paraguayan striker at the moment in terms of scoring goals in Europe. Again, not for the national team, because I think, as Fede picked up, it's actually Avalos who's been our best player in the national team, our best striker recently. But it's a great opportunity, I think, to see some players. I think you mentioned Enciso and Almiron. I was trying to think, maybe it's Enciso's first Paraguay game at Defensores del Chaco, because I know he played the Ecuador game, but that was played in Ciudad del Este. So this is a huge.
Yeah, he played against Uruguay, but then they played the Cerro Porteño Stadium.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I think this is his first time in the national stadium. he's the star at the moment. Of course, he's just won Premier League goal of the season. I mean, this is a huge moment, I think. And if you were given free entry to go and watch Julio Enciso, you probably go. I think, honestly, to watch a Paraguay-Nicaragua game on itself without that context, I don't know if I even would go for free. But when you have people like Enciso there, I think coming off the season he's had is pretty an exciting opportunity. Yeah, just a thing about Nicaragua. We've never played them before. It's going to be the 72nd opponent that Paraguay play. I was looking at similar teams. So Guatemala, we played 11 times, we've won 9. El Salvador, we played 5 times, we've won 5. So you would assume we kind of go and win this game as well. They're the most similar opponents I can think of. And it should be like a fun day out, right? Yeah, it should be an easy 2-0, 3-0 win before the serious stuff starts, which isn't far away, which is for the qualifiers. And then just a couple of things about the call-ups. In a way, there's not too many surprises, but I think it was nice to see a couple of players, Canteros, the left back who was in the under-20s. He's done very well with Guarani recently towards the end of the season, so he gets his senior call-up. And then it's nice to see Campuzano in there, because Campuzano's this really like interesting player, I think, because he's quite small. He kind of has good periods of playing. He's quite old now, right? He's late 20s, but he has these periods where he's quite good and then he disappears. Sometimes he's been injured and he's had a strange kind of career, but I think he's one of those very good technical players. And now he's in a system where his team have the ball a lot and he's able to use some of those qualities. And he's been a very important part of the Libertad title winning team. And that's what we're always looking for in Paraguay at the moment is who are those players that can somehow keep control of the ball under more intense opponents and intense pressure. Because when Paraguay's really suffered in the qualifiers was not when we didn't have the ball. We were actually pretty good when we don't have the ball, but it's when we do have the ball and teams are a bit more intensive. I remember, for example, the game against Ecuador in Quito, where suddenly Ecuador upped the intensity and Paraguay couldn't handle it. Or of course the games against Brazil, where we were far off able to do anything. So yeah, it's always interesting, I think, to play around with these pieces in midfield and try and find the person that might be able to stand up to that kind of pressure.
Yeah, go ahead, Fede. You want to say something before we?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of other names that caught my eye. Obviously, the first call up for Juan Cáceres, a right back, also. That's something that was probably the big surprise out of this list. I wasn't expecting Campuzano to be there. He's 27. Currently, he did not start the season with Libertad. He took over after a couple of injuries, a spot in the midfield. So I'm happy for him. Alexis Cantero is very good to see him there also, just because of the young blood, right? A new player, especially. We've had problems by the sides. I don't think we have our players set there yet. Arzamendia might come back to the Paraguayan league. He did not have a good run in Spain. He was our left back most of the qualifiers that happened just a couple of years ago. And there's a new name that's going to be called up for September. He's shown interest. He wants to play for the national team. He even put up a post on Instagram these last couple of days with the Paraguayan shirt. Being in Paraguay, he already did everything he needed to do from his side. Carlos Miguel Coronel, who's been lately the goalkeeper. You guys probably seen him for New York Red Bull. I would love to hear from you guys. How good is he? Because I haven't seen him play that much. I know he's 26 years old. I know he has that link with Paraguay, but is he any good, guys? Is he going to be up to the challenge? Can he take that spot away from Anthony Silva? Or is Anthony Silva going to be a goalkeeper the whole way to the next World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly he's very much a young goalkeeper, and he's been able to show some performances at the Red Bull. And you know, I think he fits the kind of what we want, because obviously Paraguay needs some sort of new goalkeeper. And, you know, obviously at his age, was he 26 or something like that? That's a big comparison to someone who's in his late 30s or anything like that and closing 40. So I think it's good to see. And, you know, obviously here we are with MLS kind of being in the kind of the spotlight with Paraguayans, and now with Lionel Messi probably playing over there at Inter Miami. I think a lot of attention is going to be given on Carlos Coronel if he really is someone that might indeed play for the national team. So I think, yeah, I personally think he's been decent. I mean, the Red Bull haven't been the best team in in the MLS at the moment, but that's nothing to do with obviously Coronel's performances. He's been great so far, but I think, yeah, I mean, I personally, I think he's a good person to have. And I think, what is it, the first Brazilian-born Paraguayan national team player that I can remember at least.
Yeah, that's a good point about the Brazilian-born, because we've had historically lots of Argentinian-born players, but off the top of my head, a Brazilian-born, that's true. I'm not too sure. But in terms of the position, I mean, I still think Anthony Silva, as long as he can give, we want to keep him in there because of the experience he has, and of course the rapport with the players. In the case of Coronel, he's 26, so sometimes I think goalkeepers, when they're still 26, is like, do we know really what level they can be? Because goalkeepers earn so much of what goalkeepers do is match experience, so it can only come with time. But it's very interesting that he's at the Red Bulls. He was at Red Bull Salzburg, so he's been part of that group, and they obviously identified him very young and took him to Europe, I think, where he started. And so there's obviously a lot of talent there, which is why he's had the career he has so far. And now he's playing regular senior football. So I think it's very good of Justo Villar and of the kind of front room staff at Paraguay that have been looking for, where can we find a solution to one of our problems, which has been goalkeeper. And this is maybe a very good medium-term solution until you get your next under 17s or under 20s goalkeeper that will, in 10 years, maybe be able to do something. But I think for now we have somebody, because otherwise Anthony Silva, by the next World Cup, he's 41. Yeah, then it's getting, we're not sure in what kind of condition he will be. So I think this is a really smart kind of move by Paraguay to identify, get more now, like I said, through social media. He's kind of committed to the Paraguayan national team, so that would be pretty cool to see going forward.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to wait and see what happens now with the national team. Let's hope they can get some sort of win against Nicaragua, and a good convincing one, as we close off another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.